you're ready to construct the block. Lay your fabrics out exactly as they will lay out in the block. This is our fabric A, our fabric B, and our fabric CD half squares. Row 1, row 2, and row 3, exactly as Marty has written in her pattern on the pages 9 and 10. Take your row 2 blocks and flip them over like a sandwich on top of your row 1 blocks. You'll be stitching these together directly down this line. We'll be chain piecing those blocks. Do not cut them apart once you've chain pieced them. Once you have chain pieced rows 1 and 2 together, lay them back on your surface and open them up. Do not cut them apart, because now we're going to sandwich row 3 over onto row 2, and we'll chain piece again along the right hand edge. Once more, do not cut these apart. It'll make it a lot easier for piecing our blocks later. You should now have a block unit that looks similar to this. The rows are still stitched together through our chain piecing. Go ahead to your iron and press towards the unpieced blocks in each unit. Then once you've done that, just certainly lay your rows over and stitch your strips together to complete your block. Follow the same instructions to make 3 additional blocks that are exactly the same. Your finished block should square up to approximately 12.5 inches. I like to use a 12.5 inch square ruler to square up my block. Once you have your 32 pairs of fabric C and F, you will use the template to notch off those engineer corners. For steps 3 and 4, you're going to need to cut another strip from fabric C being your background fabric. We'll be cutting it using both our B12 square unit and our B13 triangle, which are both the same width. So using your B12 square, square it up on your fabric. Checking in multiple areas to make sure that you have the right fabric width on your strip, and make that cut. And we will also be able to use the remaining part of the strip that we use from the half square, the quarter square triangles that we just cut using the B13. Take away the rest of your fabric and you're ready to cut your squares for step 3. It says we need 16 squares. So you can take your 2 fabrics and lay them one on top of each other, making sure that they are lined up perfectly. Remove your selvage from the left-hand side, and then use the square use the square tool number 12 to cut 16 squares. Since I have double layers of fabric, I'm cutting 4 squares at a time. Set those aside and we'll cut those engineer corners later. You'll need to make 4 cuts. Once you have your 16 squares, go ahead and use your square tool number 12 and cut those engineered corners. Step 5 of the weather vane block calls for you to cut 16 number 8 squares. The number 8 square we use also in the Jacob's Road pattern. You use the same method, using the square to determine the width of your block. Check your strip width at multiple locations before cutting, and you will need to cut 2 strips from your fabric E. Layer your 2 strips together. Trim the selvage from the left-hand side. And then cut your 16 squares. Once you've cut your 16 squares, which will be just 4 cuts since you're cutting through 4 layers of fabric at one time, then you will use the square and trim off your engineer corners. We are now ready for step 6 of the weather vane block. Step 6 is going to involve fabric G and the number 12 square, the small square. We'll need 2 strips, the width of the square. Using the same method we've used in the past, you'll use the square to determine the width of the strip, checking on both ends of your fabric, and cut 2 strips. Once you've cut your 2 strips, turn the fabric to the side, remove the selvage as you have in the past. Cut your 20. Cut 20 squares. I cut mine in sets of 4 and then use the square tool to notch off those engineer corners. For the weather vane block, you'll need to use 16 of the squares, take 4 of the squares, and set them aside. We're now ready to move on to the weather vane block on page 11. We'll be using fabrics F and fabric C. Fabric C is our background fabric. Fabric F is our dark contrast. And we'll be using the very small triangle, triangle 13. It's the small quarter square unit. We'll need to cut 1 strip of each of the fabrics, so I've laid them together. I've squared off the right hand edge, and I will use the same method I've used in the past, where I will use the template to determine the width of the strip. Got the template lined up there. I'll move the template up to the top. And cut 1 strip. Remove the 2 fabrics because we'll just be working with the strip. Remove the 2 selvages from the strips, and now we're going to do similar like what we did with the Jacob's Road. The Jacob's Road blocks, we'll be taking our 2 strips and putting them right sides together. Note that I've got them right sides together so the wrong side will be facing up. Now we'll take our number 13 template and we'll lay it on our strip set and make a cut. Flip it over for the next cut. And the next cut. And continue until you've made 32 pairs of this set 13. Now it's time to start sewing the blocks together for the weather vane. You're going to be working on each subunit of the block because it's easier to take care of all the subunits at one time before trying to put the entire block together. You'll begin by stitching the 32 small half square triangle sets together. Again, I used my beginner to begin stitching through and then ran all those half squares through the machine until I had a long sausage piece that looks like this. Once you have them all run through the machine, you can cut each unit apart and press towards the darker of the two fabrics.